This is a Dubai Eye 103.8 podcast. This is Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
Live your best life.
On Dubai Eye 103.8.
Are you wearing your mask wrong? And which one should you be wearing? Had a bit of a deep dive into masks. Speaking to dermatologist Dr. Mohammed Baza of Mediclinic City Hospital, putting together a paper on the effects of mask on the skin. What do we need to know and do? Talking hair loss with Dr. Fiona Cowie of Dermalay's Clinic, offering her advice on busting some myths too. And finally, with many sadly losing loved ones to COVID-19 and unable to travel to spend time with friends and family, we speak to Dr. Tharai, clinical psychologist at the Human Relations Institute and Clinic, about grieving during the pandemic.
Healthy habits.
On Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
We are talking masks. We are starting with Dr. Mohammed Baza, dermatologist at Mediclinic City Hospital, who's written a paper on the effects of masks on the skin. How are you, doctor?
Oh, hello. Nice to meet you. Thank you for your invitation.
Great to have you on the line. As I said, a range of experts on all things mask, and I've now got quite a jazzy mask wardrobe going on. We've got a big bowl of them next to the door. I've got some disposables in the car. My husband's despairing that they're in every single bag and pocket. And it's incredible to think that 6 months ago this was a completely foreign concept. I remember going to the John Legend concert and seeing people a few rows behind me wearing a mask and going, who are these clowns? And now we look at people who aren't wearing masks and go, look at those clowns. So I just wanted to establish a little bit about masks in general, really. What does the World Health Organization say about wearing masks? How effective are they in terms of preventing the spread of viruses, particularly COVID-19? You're obviously privy to a lot of information from colleagues and medical papers as well, Dr. Mohammed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it has proven now out of that masks are very effective in preventing cross-infection between people, and it's effective when everyone wears them. And if everyone wears them, it reduces the rate of infection by almost 90%. But that depends. It depends on the type of the mask. The most common mask which people wear now is called disposable surgical mask. They reduce the rate of infection by about 50%. And there are people that wear it with cloth masks. They make them at home, and these one less effective. They may reduce the rate of infection by about 25%. But the most effective one is the N95 mask, which usually the healthcare professional wearing them, and they reduce the rate of infection by almost 90%. But not everyone can tolerate this N95, and they're so tight and so powerful, and they cause a lot of problems. So most people now end up wearing the surgical mask. You see them outside on the road, and they reduce the rate of infection by almost 70 to 80%. As long as everyone is wearing them, and they wear them in the right way, and they change them frequently, and they don't touch their face when they wear the mask, because the problem is that if you keep your hands away from your face, is what is the most important, and that's very difficult habit not to do. Everyone is holding the mask in the front and touching his eyes, touching his mouth, and that sometimes can be a problem. But definitely now, I think the recommendation that everyone, when they are in public area, they should wear a mask.
And hefty fines if you're not, people. Quick reminder, 3,000 dirhams for not wearing a mask properly, indeed in public, and the same in cars as well if you're sharing a car with someone who's not in your family. And I would just like to take this opportunity when we're talking about this disposable masks, please dispose of them properly. You know, there's all sorts of alarming statistics that there are more disposable masks in our sea than there are jellyfish right now. I don't know who's counted this, but it does seem plausible given the number that I'm seeing, you know, by the side of the road and on beaches and things. So please do dispose of them properly. Dr. Mohammed, can you tell us a little bit about the paper you are working on when it comes to the effects of masks on the skin? What are you trying to find out?
Yes, I think, as you said to me before 6 months ago, it looked odd if someone wearing a mask, because you think, oh, what's wrong with the immune system? You take chemotherapy. Now it looks more odd if you are not wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. But everything comes with a price. I think the masks themselves, although they protect us from infection, but they do have some risk, they do have some problems within themselves. But on the balance, here we're saying that wearing a mask is far better than not wearing them, even with the problem they carry. The main problem with the mask, there's two types of problems. There's people with existing medical problems, they can make it worse. Like someone has acne, someone has dermatitis, they have some sort of skin issues in their face, and the mask by creating more heat, more humidity, it makes it worse. But at the same time, the mask themselves sometimes can cause problems to someone who has a normal skin. Some of them are too tight and they cause pressure, they cause bruise. And especially the stronger one, the tight one, the N95 one, if you wear them for more than 2-3 hours, after you take them off, you see like you look like you've been smacked or been burned. And some of them, they really cause the deep pressure ulcers on the cheeks, on the bridge of the nose, because the skin of the nose is so thin and the bridge is so sensitive to the trauma. And also this elastic band in the back of the ear, sometimes they cause a lot of friction and trauma. Added to that, they cause a lot of some sort of irritant type eczema. The skin becomes dry, becomes so itchy under the mask. So we advise people is that not to wear the mask for long hours. If it's possible, get out in the toilet somewhere or get out somewhere when there's no public and you take them off. Use plenty of moisturizing cream and changing them. Don't rewear the same mask again after 4 hours. It's better change because some of them, what they do, they have this surgical mask that's hanging in their car or somewhere else and they keep wearing it in and off, even though it's useless and causes a lot of problems. So they do carry some issue with them and problems when you wear them for a long time.
Can I ask you about maskne? So acne caused by masks. It is real. I think I've had a few bouts of it over the last few months. What's your advice of someone who is perhaps getting breakouts that are, spots really caused, as you say, by either friction or humidity? What can we do?
Along with this general advice about the way they wear the mask, we treat them as acne. We treat them with what you call like a cleanser, topical antibiotic, a short course, a systemic antibiotic. But we advise them all the time before they wear the mask. They just use moisturizing cream, use non-perfume soap. Ladies, especially ladies, that's probably more common in ladies. I see them that because some of them wear thick makeup or foundation. This makeup, I think at the time of the corona and the mask, to be honest with you, I advise ladies and girls, especially just to stay away from the makeup if they can. And they want to use this light one, not thick one, and avoid the foundation powder especially.
And as you know, school's going back next week and children over the age of 6 being required to wear them. We're obviously seeing internationally all sorts of different countries choosing different rules. France, over age 11. Scotland is enforcing face coverings. When it comes to protecting our children's faces and if they are going to be wearing masks at school for hours on end, what is the best mask to choose for children, do you think? And how can we protect their skin?
Yes. Definitely N95 are not recommended for children. I think they're mainly for health professionals. They're so powerful, so tight, and some children can't tolerate them. They make you feel like you're suffocated, but they're so strong and powerful. So I would stick with the surgical disposable one, but it's better if they wear them, the one at the lunchtime, they throw it away, have a new one after lunchtime. And then if they want to use their cloth one, they want to make at home, it has to be 2 layers and it has to be washed every day when they come back home. And I think, to be honest with you, if they take my advice, they should give the kids what they call a free time during the day just to go out somewhere and just have a little bit of breathing. They need to breathe their face. And all kids should be advised to use a lot of moisturizing cream before and after they apply the mask.
Good advice indeed. Dr. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us, the dermatologist at Mediclinic City. Please keep us posted on that paper regarding the effects of masks on skin. And thank you for all of your great advice about what to wear and how to wear it.
Healthy habits.
On Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
We are having a health special this afternoon discussing hair loss. On the line, we are joined by Dr. Fiona Cowie. She's got decades of experience when it comes to general and wellness medicine, aesthetic and laser medicine as well. And we're talking about something that upsets an awful lot of men and women. How are you, Doctor?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Absolute pleasure. Now, you have worked across the globe and had patients from all countries everywhere, UK, US. You're working here now in Dubai. And I just wondered if we could bust the big myth, or is it not a myth? Is there any truth that Dubai water makes us lose hair, Doctor?
Certainly seems to be truth in it, I must say. I've worked in Dubai for 7 years, and it's one of the commonest things that we get asked about in the clinics. People are always coming in, and a lot of it's due to the water quality. So if one thing you take away from this is please buy a water filter for your shower, because it does make a big difference with your hair.
That's fascinating. I was expecting you to go, do you know what's not? It's just because we leave stressful lives here, and that's why.
It's a bit of that as well, definitely.
That's so
the water
interesting.
filter plays a part.
So
we get people in all of the time, men, women, young, old, and quite often there's no real cause for them to have the hair loss, but they come in very distressed that every time they're having a shower, their hair is blocking the sink. Now, obviously, as doctors, we take a good history and check they've not got any other reasons for the hair loss. But quite often, as you say, stressful lives, maybe not eating the best diet, but definitely the water quality as well, can all contribute to us having this extra hair loss.
can I ask you, what would you deem as a doctor to be normal hair loss? So, how many strands a day do you think would be acceptable?
Exactly. Anything up to about 100 strands a day is completely acceptable. So probably 50 to 100, and people start getting worried. But if you pinch, a section of your hair and just gently pull, if you just get a few strands out, that is not a medical sort of grade of hair loss. It's nothing really to worry about. And, at different times in our lives, we sometimes have more hair loss than others. For example, when you're pregnant, we all know women get lovely glossy hair.
And
because
then,
the hair doesn't
disaster.
fall out. Exactly. It all comes out later. But it's just hair itself goes through a growing phase, a switching off phase, and then a resting phase. And when you're pregnant, the hair doesn't go into the switching off phase due to the hormones in your body. So once you have the baby, unfortunately, all the hair that should have fallen out for the last few months all comes out with a vengeance in one go. And that's why people get the severe hair loss post-pregnancy.
Which is the last thing you want when you're having all your nice maternity photos taken, and then you
It
get
happened to me.
and me, and then I had these kind of bizarre little baby hairs under my fringe and all around my hairline for years and years and years.
Exactly. The baby hairs we like. It's when you don't have the baby hairs we have to worry. That's when people are concerned they've got things like alopecia, or if there's like a genetic thing in your family, men and women, that you start losing hair at a young age. Now that we can't do an awful lot to help. But if you're just finding you're losing more hairs than normal, and you come see us, we usually check things that you've not got a thyroid hormone problem, trouble with your iron levels, which is another very common one, or your hormones can sometimes for women cause problems. Men's and females' hormones can play a big part in this. And we usually check for those, or get you to ask your GP to check for those things first. If everything else is okay, then we can offer various treatments from the clinic that can help to make your hair grow more, to get more of those hair follicles into a growth phase rather than switching off and resting.
I'm really glad we're talking to you today, Dr. Fiona, because hair loss is emerging as something of a surprising but perhaps wholly not uncommon symptom of COVID-19. Now, a growing number of patients, including actress Alyssa Milano, have reported losing great chunks of hair. This is what the actress Alyssa Milano had to say.
I just wanted to show you the amount of hair that's coming out of my head as a result of COVID. As you can see in there, there is no hair in there right now. One brushing. This is my hair loss from COVID-19.
To check out the video, it is actually quite shocking. And while the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention hasn't yet listed hair loss as a symptom of COVID-19, photos of large clumps of hair and patchy thin hairlines are plastered across patient support Facebook groups, social media. Doctors saying it's linked to the stress and trauma of battling COVID-19. And I just wondered if you could explain the link between stress and trauma and hair loss.
No problem. No trouble at all. And obviously, when we're stressed, our bodies aren't working optimally. And say, if from a medical point of view, everything is fine with you, then we have to look at the fact that maybe we're not absorbing or taking enough in of the nutrients and things that we need to actually make the hair itself. So sometimes, the stress itself stops your gastrointestinal tract from absorbing things properly. And we need plenty of things like biotin and or vitamins and stuff, iron, quite a lot of these little nutrients to actually allow the hair cells to actually form new hair. And we find that with stress itself, your body stops producing things as they should do. Your body isn't able to repair itself so well. So we're always constantly remaking new bits of our body, breaking down old bits. And if we haven't got all these building blocks there because your system is maybe breaking down too much as a result of stress, or you're not absorbing enough of these nutrients, then we can get into problems. One of the things we recommend is one of our oligo scans, where we can actually use a simple little light device on your hand, and it can tell us exactly if you're deficient in anything or what the problems are. And we can offer things like the wellness IV drips to promote hair growth and restoration, as well as, giving you advice on any supplements you need to take.
I'm going to be grilling you on that very soon. Dr. Fiona's with us.
Don't you worry.
On hand to take questions this afternoon. We've got a number to get through between now and past. So if you need any advice on hair loss, please do reach out on 4001. Can I ask you, what should we all be doing every day for good scalp and hair health, Doctor? What do you do?
Okay, well, basically not washing your hair too frequently. I know that goes against the grain, but people who wash their hair every day are probably going to cause more problems with the detergents and stuff that they're using in their shampoos than anything else. Obviously, sort of looking after your hair, getting it sort of trimmed and stuff regularly, great. But from my medical point of view, eating a healthy diet, getting plenty of good diet containing all of the things that you need to build up your hair. So biotin is excellent. You can buy that in many forms across the counter. That's great for growing hair and nails, and also making sure that you're not lacking iron. So eating some more iron-containing foods. And that's probably the basic things for it.
Dr. Fiona, I just wanted to ask you, is it a myth when it comes to male pattern baldness, hereditary baldness? Is it true that men take after their maternal grandfather?
It does seem to, I don't think there's any definitive results about this, but it does seem to be that you follow the maternal side rather than the man's side. So a bit of a comfort for guys whose mother's father does have a full head of hair, or the uncles on the mother's side have a full head of hair. You are genetically a little bit more likely to hang on to your own luscious locks than if they were bald.
Jamal's been in touch saying, I'm going bald, but my older brother, I'm 30 and he's 44, is not. He's written in capitals, not fair. What's going on? Why does it tend to be different even between siblings?
It just depends on the genetics, doesn't
Sorry,
it? You inherit information. I know, you inherit information from your mum and your dad, and it just depends which one is more dominant in you. So unfortunately, some of you will win the genetic lottery for hair and some will lose.
Now, it's no secret that Virgin Radio's Big Rossi has had a hair transplant, and do check out his social media, check out the results. We spoke to him earlier and asked him whether he was insecure about going bald at age 30.
Well, it wasn't until I worked with a colleague of mine who used to look at me from above and say, hey, you're losing your hair there. His name's Chris Fade. And then I started thinking, actually, I am losing my hair. And then I started looking in the mirror and I started getting really paranoid about it because I had these 3 lines in the top of my head, like wrinkles. It's actually it's like a disease or whatever it is. And I thought, I need to do something. And then I got a direct hair implantation to sort of solve the problem.
And is he happier now?
Yeah, I'm really happy with it. It was such an easy procedure as well. And I'd really recommend anyone who is feeling low in confidence about the hairline to go and get it done because it's great. I feel so much better now. It'll make you feel better. You'll feel more confident and a lot younger.
Do check out his social media to see the before and after. Who doesn't love a good before and after? So really pleased for Rossi there for getting the results that he was after. Now, for those people who are considering a procedure, how do hair transplants work, Doctor?
Not my exact field, actually. I have to say I'm aesthetics rather than the hair transplant surgery. So you're probably better off to ask one of those. But basically, we take little bits of the hair, take them out and transplant them back into the bits where you're losing hair. So say from the back of your hair, if you're losing hair on the top, and the individual hairs are retransplanted back in to cover the area that's going bald. But as I say, that's transplant surgeons. I'm aesthetic and wellness. So
reach out to Rossi's surgeon.
Exactly.
We've had a question here from Arabella on the phone line. Here's Arabella.
Hi, Helen. My question is, I had a baby last year and I seem to be losing my hair since then. I just lose it in clumps. And I tried hair loss shampoos, but they don't seem to be working. So I just wondered if there were any tips. Thank you.
I knew we'd get a pregnancy-related question, Dr. Fiona. What are your thoughts there?
Well, obviously, someone that needs to come on in and this, we probably do blood checks, just her blood count and her iron levels aren't low. Check her hormone levels to see if that's anything to do with the hair not growing. Usually it's just the stress to the body of the pregnancy and the hormonal changes which can cause the hair loss. But by this time, I'd expect her to have some new baby hairs growing through. If they weren't growing particularly fast and she wanted a boost to that, then we can do treatments like the PRP, the growth factors from the blood, or the synthetic ones, which are specific for hair, which we inject into the scalp, and it will make the little hair follicles start producing new hairs and make them grow faster. And we can also combine that with the IV drips that are packed full of all the vitamins and minerals and stuff that are needed for hair growth. So for anyone that's suffering from postpartum hair loss, come and talk to us. It's not something to sit at home and worry about. There are some very, very simple treatments that we can do which can get you back on track and get your hair looking luscious and full again.
I'm glad you mentioned PRP there, because we've had a message saying, how effective is PRP for hair and beard?
Very
for anyone
good.
who's not familiar with PRP, can you explain what it is and how it works, please?
I can. Of course. PRP is platelet-rich plasma. Basically, in your blood, you have all the little baby cells, stem cells, and growth factors to repair your body. As we grow older, we're always breaking down bits of our body and replacing it with new bits. So we need the ability to harness that, but we lose that as we age. Now, very luckily for us, anything that we need growth factors for making skin look better, growing out lines and wrinkles, or making hair restore itself is available in the blood. So what we do is just take a simple blood sample from you. The blood is spun around in a test tube with a little activated compound to separate the plasma from the blood. And then a chemical is put into the plasma to stimulate all of the hair growth factors. So for the next half hour or so, they go crazy and just want to fix any hair follicles that are damaged or make them sort of wake up and start growing again. So what we do is we'll inject this with a very tiny little needle into the areas where you've lost the hair. And what you'll find is over the next few weeks, some of the hairs that were in the resting phase will start to regrow. We usually recommend that you do 3 treatments a month apart for the PRP, and then maybe we'll review it again after 3 to 6 months and see how things are going. Obviously, men might seem to see results a bit faster because their hair is short, whereas women, we have longer hair and it takes a longer time to grow in long and thick. But PRP is something that people are very, very happy with in general, and it works for pretty much everybody. If you're older or you have some immune problems, we actually have ready-made growth factors as well, and these can be very, very beneficial too.
And the question was asking about hair and beard. Can it be used on the face to stimulate hair growth there as well?
Of course it can. Exactly. I mean, obviously we would use the growth factor specific for hair growth and just inject it into the beard area. That's perfectly fine. It works just as well wherever we put it.
Brilliant. Thank you for all of your advice, all of your myth busting. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me on.
Healthy habits.
On Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
In conversation now with Dr. Thrier. She's a clinical psychologist at the Human Relations Institute and Clinic. And it's Grief Awareness Day on August 30th. Now, tragically, there are more than 23 million cases of COVID-19 in the world and resulted in about 800,000 deaths. And that means a lot of people are grieving after losing their loved ones to the virus. And the UAE have had nearly 380 deaths. And there are unfortunately cases where people haven't been able to get home to say goodbye to their loved ones. We're talking about grief this afternoon, the process of grief, how there's no right or wrong way to grieve. How are you, Dr. T?
I'm good. How are you doing, Helen?
I'm well, thank you. But this is a really upsetting topic, and I've had friends who have experienced this, losing loved ones to COVID-19 and also losing loved ones during a pandemic. And it's an incredibly complicated process because I think regardless of your culture, there's always some kind of process that you go to, whether that's being with friends and family, whether that means going to church or going to funeral or just being as a family to say goodbye. And those anchors, those processes sometimes just haven't been possible because of travel restrictions, because of COVID-19 itself. So we are going to be talking about that this afternoon. But I'd love to almost start with a little bit of your thoughts as a psychologist about grief. How do you define it, and where does it begin and end, really?
Well, interestingly enough, it's so hard to define grief because every person kind of feels it in a different way. But essentially what grief is a feeling of loss in whichever way that is. And ultimately, when we do look at grief, we look at quite a few stages that people usually go through, and I'm sure everybody's kind of heard of the different stages of grief.
And it's almost become a bit of a common psychology trope. Oh, you're walking through the griefs, through the stages of grief, and it's been applied to all sorts of different, or sometimes seemingly unrelated topics. But can you remind us of those stages of grief and talk about how they are applicable?
Of course. So ultimately, when you talk about there are different stages of grief, but the ones that we usually recognize is the denial and isolation or shock and disbelief stage, which is usually in the beginning. And then you can work into anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance or hope. Now, each stage obviously is not linear, so you don't start with denial and shock and then work towards acceptance. Sometimes you can start with anger and then go back to denial and then jump into depression and then go into bargaining. So it's kind of all over the place. And a lot of people think that, this should happen within a specific amount of time to be considered, quote unquote, acceptable or normal. Ultimately, that's not the case. Sometimes people can grieve for their whole lives and still be in their acceptance stage. And sometimes when something triggers them, they might feel a sense of anger or a sense of depression. There was a psychologist who actually created a very beautiful visual depiction of the feelings that have to do with grief. And basically what that is that it's a box, and inside the box there's a button, and that's the pain button that you feel from whatever it is that you've lost. And then initially what happens is that there's a kind of like a big circle inside the box, and you are that box. So every move you make, every step you take, you're pretty much feeling that ball hit the pain button. So you're feeling the pain all the time, every day of your life, and every moment and every second. And as you get through life, though, the ball is the only thing that gets smaller. So as it's bouncing around, it doesn't always hit the pain button. But when it does, the pain is felt just as it was felt the first time it was when something first happened. And
wow, that is, because and I think everyone who's been through grief will absolutely understand that sometimes it can blindside you. Sometimes the smallest thing it should be small, but it triggers something that's big inside you. And
absolutely.
One thing that I read maybe about a year or so ago now that's really stayed with me is, we've all had those mornings when you wake up and you think everything's okay, and then suddenly you remember that things aren't. And sometimes grief can be very much like that. And it's the kind of the swimming pool analogy, which is, you think you're standing on solid ground, and next thing you know, you're out of your depth, and you have that moment of, I'm not okay. I'm not stable. Things are not what I thought they were, and sometimes it can really, really take people by surprise. And as you say, it can take an awfully long time to recognize that, process that grief, and even to realize that that's what it is. Months or years or even decades later. And I think that's such an important thing to emphasize, that there is no right or wrong way to grieve. There is no, time, allotted to that grieving process. It's been 2 years now, you should be fine, or it's been 20 years now.
Exactly.
And I think especially when you lose really, really close people. I've heard actually a good friend's dad saying when he lost his wife, I thought it'd be like giving up smoking and that I would miss her less every single day. But he says it's like not drinking water, and I miss her more every day. And I feel like that's such a beautiful way of putting it. That, it doesn't necessarily get easier the more time passes, because you can miss that person more and more, and in a more longing way. And I feel like how we process that grief, how we deal with it in the moment, can be so important. And unfortunately, some people right now, because of COVID-19, haven't been able to be with their family, to be with their loved ones, and have the comfort that they need from those people and those processes in order to do that. And I've heard from numerous people saying they haven't been able to have a big cry, since the death of their loved ones. And I just wondered, how important is that big release sometimes?
Well, a lot of people kind of might say something like, I haven't cried yet over the grief of X, and it's been a year or it's been 2 years. And crying is not the only way you can show your sadness. Crying is a way, but it's not the only way. And I think, especially during COVID, one of the worst parts of not being with your loved one or somebody that you know when they pass is that you're still in that sense of shock and denial. Like, it's not real for you yet because of the fact that you're not there, and you're not, and being a part of that where you can visually see and experience the rituals that people go through during a loss or a death. It's so important because it helps you process the reality of the situation. And unfortunately, COVID has made it very difficult for a lot of people in that sense, because they're not able to either fly back and be with either family or friends and mourn the loss of that individual face to face. That's becoming very difficult. And so a lot of people are kind of stuck in the disbelief and shock phase because of it. And, this is not to say that others have not kind of progressed. Of course, some people, they do jump into, either depression or anger or that bargaining phase. Like and the bargaining phase can be very guilt-ridden, especially now, because people are kind of on the level of, I wish I was there. I should be there. It could have been, I could have been by their side when they passed, or like I could have been around them or could have spoken to them some more. And so that kind of bargaining feeling is increasing that level of guilt that a lot of people are experiencing because of the fact that they're not really able to even make it to the funeral and things like that. So, I mean, definitely COVID and the pandemic and the restrictions on traveling has made it extremely difficult for people to truly process the grief that they're experiencing. And on some level, it does kind of help in one way, in the sense of the anger stage, because sometimes we need to externalize anger, and sometimes getting angry at governments, airlines, flight patterns, things like that, because we can't be there, that can help us process a bit. But for somebody who's not feeling that sense of anger, they might still be in, like I mentioned, either in the shock or the denial, or a complete sense of this, I could have done something different. And so it's really, COVID is making it very difficult for people to truly process their grief, not in quote unquote the right way, but just to process it, period.
Can I ask Dr. Rai, what happens if you have almost no reaction? What if you're in a situation where it feels so abstract and remote that you've lost someone thousands of miles away, you can't be with family and friends, and you throw yourself back into life, into busyness, and into the craziness of the world? What happens if you don't get the help that you need or don't process grief in the moment?
So unfortunately, like all the emotions that we have, and I say unfortunately, but it's not, it's actually fortunately, but that, any emotions that you repress or you suppress, you end up feeling tenfold later on. So it's really important to kind of process whatever emotions you go to. And this is not to say that you have to do it in the moment. Some people, they do. Once they suffer a loss or something, they push themselves into work. They become workaholics because they need that distraction in the moment. And sometimes that's okay, and because that's where they need to be at in their process at this moment. However, if this happens for too long, it can be extremely detrimental, because essentially what will end up happening is that all of that pain will be transferred into something even basically an unhealthy or dysfunctional coping strategy, which would either be anger towards other people, it could be misusing substances, it could be, drinking, smoking, things like that. So it might eventually lead, it will eventually lead to much more detrimental things than if you kind of work towards processing the emotions. And this is at a person's pace. So I do want to really emphasize the fact that there is no right and wrong, just like you said, Helen. I mean, ultimately, when it comes to grieving, everyone has to kind of find whatever works for them to grieve, but it is still important to grieve. It's important to kind of recognize and name it. And a lot of people, they don't want to, because it is very painful to name the feelings that they have, the sadness, the missing, the longing, maybe even the feelings of guilt, maybe the feelings of anger towards a certain person or resentment that they've had for a very long time. I mean, there could be an array of emotions, and if they're not named and claimed, what ends up happening is that those just fester and then manifest themselves in completely dysfunctional ways.
I really am sending all the hugs out to anyone who really needs one right now when it comes to grief, to not having the people in place that you need in order to say goodbye. And please never be afraid to reach out and get the help you need, so you've got someone to talk to. Dr. Thuraiya, as ever, thank you for your insights and advice. You're an absolute superstar. Stay well, and we'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to a Dubai Eye 103.8 podcast. To enjoy lots more from Dubai Eye in the United Arab Emirates, just go to DubaiEye1038.com or find them wherever you normally get your podcasts.